I am going to deep clean this game and see if I can get it working again.
8-bit joystick.
So, an intrepid viewer wanted me to take a look at her copy of The Legend of Zelda. She purchased it online but was never able to get it actually working. So, I'm going to open it up and see what I can do. Now, typically there are 3 things that can go wrong with old cartridges to prevent them from playing. 1. There's too much corrosive ion residue on the connector pins. 2. Broken leads or connection issues on the board itself. 3. Damaged chips from a short. Now, I can deal with the first one, and a good retro game store can deal with the second one, and it's a goner if it's number 3. So, in order for a game cartridge to play, there needs to be an electrical connection established between the pins on the cartridge and the reader pins on the game system. Then, there needs to be intact traces on the circuit board between the connector pins on the cartridge and the ROM chips that actually store the data that make up the game. And finally, the ROM chips need to work. Now, the most common issue is the buildup of corrosive ion residue from the oxidation of the metal, which will cause electrical resistance and will prevent the transmission of electrons to cross between the pieces of metal on the pins that are pressed next to each other. And if there's too much electrical resistance on those connectors, then you're not going to get data transmission and it's not going to work. And to make matters worse, the NES had the 10-pin lockout chip that would refuse to play a game if there was any connection issues. Now, I have neutralized that chip on my NES systems, but still, if there isn't sufficient connections, the game isn't going to be playable, or the graphics or the code is going to be garbled. The easiest method is to take a Q-tip and soak it in industrial alcohol and scrub the connectors. Then I usually take the dry side of the Q-tip and give it another pass while turning it. I like to go straight, then I like to do some circles, and I'll take a couple passes of it. Now, that's the first step, and if that doesn't work, I will take more aggressive methods. Now, this is my Pink Gorilla Bootleg buddy, and it includes a small Nintendo security bit screwdriver, which you can use to take out those screws on a Nintendo cartridge and pop out the circuit board. Then I will take an eraser, a regular pink eraser, and give the connector pins a good scrubbing. Now, I use some pressure, but not enough to damage anything. Now, keep in mind that some of the corrosive ion residue is hard to see. Then I will wipe away all the rubber bits and clean it with industrial alcohol again and then let it dry. Now, if that doesn't work, I will use a surface cleaner such as 409 and scrub the pins and then clean that off with some industrial alcohol and try again. Now, I will also inspect the motherboard for evidence of a spill or dried soda or something like that. And I'm also going to check to see if any of the capacitors and electronic bits on the motherboard are visibly swollen, broken, or anything like that. For those of you who are electronically inclined and know how to use a voltmeter and solder gun, then what they can do is check the traces on the board to see if there are any connection problems due to cracked metal or a scrape or whatever. And if there is, that can be repaired either by soldering a piece of wire between the 2 points or reapplying a new layer of solder to a pin that doesn't have enough metal left to have a decent connection. And if that doesn't work, then there is the option of taking a less expensive game that uses the same board layout and desolder the chips off the board and then physically solder them to the new board. This is usually reserved for the really expensive games because it's a lot of work. Now, another question to ask is it worth repairing? So pretty much every cart is worth cleaning and doing a deep clean to see if you can get it working. And if you have your own equipment to check traces and you know what you're doing with a solder gun, go ahead by all means and see if you can repair a bad lead or apply new tin to a bad pad. But if the chips are shorted out, then it's a goner. And you have my sympathy because it's dead, Jim. Now, another option is to buy another copy of the game and combine the components to get the best version. Now, I have a copy of The Legend of Zelda and it works perfectly, and I got it at Hawthorne Game Exchange, and they replaced the battery on it. However, the case has gotten a good amount of scruff, and it's got some scruff marks on it, but that's fine because I love scruffy games. This case of The Legend of Zelda that I'm trying to get working, it looks meticulous and it looks wonderful. However, the board is failing to work, so I might transfer the board from my copy to this copy. I know, kitty. I wish it worked. And then take the game to a local game shop and hire a professional who has a voltmeter and a soldering gun. A copy of The Legend of Zelda sells for about $25 to $30 these days, and it's a great game, but it's not crazy rare, and it's right at that point where it would really hurt me if it wouldn't work. But I really love The Legend of Zelda, so this is a worthy endeavor in my book. I know where my limits are, and I'm 100% okay with hiring professionals that know more than I, and I am willing to humbly ask them to take a look at it. So I went to Hawthorne Game Exchange and got some interesting but bad news. They deep cleaned the pin connectors, checked for bad traces on the board using a voltmeter, and even resoldered the pads using fresh solder, only to find out that the chips are quite busted and quite dead. And it's not like a little dead and it can be brought back to life. We have exhausted every known measure and rigor mortis has truly set in. It is really dead. Originally, it was purchased on eBay, and I'm continuously skeptical about games sold by random people online with little accountability. But personally, I wonder how the hell did they actually kill this board? I didn't see any fluid spilled inside, and usually a soda spill leaves some residue, so maybe it was water or had an electrical shock. I don't know, but it is DEAD dead. Well, at least it's a common game, and there are literally millions of copies of them in circulation. However, death is a part of life, and we're not going to let this video have an unhappy ending, so I'm weighing my options. Now, my viewer got her pristine gold shiny case back and now has my working board with a new battery in it, courtesy of Hawthorne Game Exchange, which is where I initially purchased it from. So I could just keep the gold Legend of Zelda case in my collection and have it look cool. And I'm not really missing too much because I probably have a dozen ways of playing this game on original hardware using an EverDrive or the Famicom version of the cartridge. So I have my Hyperkin 1 HD over by my 9-inch CRT on my bookshelf over at the end of my living room sofa. And what I'm thinking about doing is taking a bootleg multi-cart that has 143 NES games on it, including The Legend of Zelda, and transplanting it inside this gold Legend of Zelda awesome case. I was debating between which of these two bootleg multi-carts I was going to use, and there's this one that I saw at SideQuest Expo, and I asked the guy about it, and he said, "Here, take it, I hate these things," and gave it to me. So, score. And I like how they used a Famicom cart with an NES adapter inside a clear NES case. And I sort of like this, but I don't really want to mess with it. However, this red cart that I got on AliExpress is perfect for this. Now, technically, I'm taking an authentic case and putting a bootleg board inside of it. And I'm okay with that because I'm not going to sell it to anyone. It's interesting that the bootleg cartridge uses Phillips screws while the Zelda cartridge uses Nintendo security bits. Taking them apart, I noticed two issues. First is that the board doesn't fit, since it is slightly too wide to fit in between the screw wells. However, it looks like I could remedy this by grinding or cutting the case down using my powered Dremel tool, and this is what I did with a couple finagling and tries. The other issue is that the board is going to slide around on the left side, and I plan on remedy this with some electrical tape. Now, electrical tape is non-conducting, and it should be okay to place on top of the board without creating any issues besides making things a little sticky. Besides, it's electrical tape. It's meant to be used with electronics. Now, one of the whole reasons why someone would want to play a retro video game on a cartridge when we have other ways of playing it is because of the story that we have attached to the physical copy of this game and this particular cartridge. And for me, that includes the process of making this very video. I have a tiny little chapter in my life story that's connected to each copy of The Legend of Zelda that I've owned over the years. There's my original childhood copy that I had as a kid and then I got rid of. And then there was a copy that I got in my 20s and I sold to Pink Gorilla Games before going back to college. And then there was this copy that I got in my 40s and I passed on the game board to someone who wanted to play through it. And now I have my own experiences of making this video tied to this physical Frankenstein hybrid cartridge that looks like a regular copy of The Legend of Zelda, but it has a ton of games that I can access just by hitting a button on the TV and hitting a button on the console. And the crazy thing is by just watching this video, you are now part of the story of this cartridge. Not to get all sentimental and fourth wall breaking sappy on you. Anyway, I'm glad that this worked out, and it's a lot more aesthetically pleasing to have a copy of The Legend of Zelda in my system rather than this rather obnoxious looking bootleg multi-card. Now, I had absolutely no idea that I was going to be going down this rabbit hole when I started this little project, but at least I got an interesting video and an interesting story out of it. But normally, these old game cartridges just have a ton of corrosive ion residue built up on the connector pins that you just got to clean off and then they're good to go. I got a gold cartridge and a gold kitty. So we wanted to let you know that we make awesome videos like this each week. New videos come out every Saturday, so you should actually subscribe because we make awesome videos like this each week. And subscribing makes Kitty happy. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro. I'm gonna go play Legend of Zelda and snuggle a kitty cat.